Let's have a quick overview of the G-Config application, which is our configuration interface for Ganister. So if you come from the classic login page for any user and you're logged as an admin, you can, let's get back to English here, you can navigate to the G-Config from this button here, go to app config, and you land on this sort of dashboard where you have different menus. This is where you will configure the whole application. So first is the data model, where you will define the data model, define all your node types, so all your business objects, for which you will add properties and specific behaviors. If you don't get the feature you want by manipulating the data model, you can still add some specific features by writing methods. Then you can manage your groups, permissions, and users through a specific interface. You can manage a list of values. You can design reports. You can list the categories that you will see on the left panel. Health report is specifically for when you have some specific data that are, for example, migrated to your system, and you want to check that all the data you've included are correct for being manipulated with Ganister. The settings are a few general settings about the application. Translation, you've seen in the Ganister client application that there are potentially many languages, so you can translate all these. We have an API documentation for all the REST API that Ganister exposes, and a tech documentation on how to do all these manipulation. So let's just dive into the data model real quick. We are just doing an overview of the G-Config. There will be another video about how to actually create a new node type, etc. So here you will see the data model, all the objects. If I click on an object, I have all its definition. The properties are listed, some system properties and some user or custom properties. You've got the UI, so we separate the model from the actual UI. So all the grid columns are potentially different from the model itself. There might be some styling, some calculated, etc. The form designer, we have a form designer. Because our forms are responsive, you can't really specify each pixel of every form inputs or form elements that you want to position. So it's more an order and a broad placement of all the elements. Tabs, we have predefined a certain amount of tabs that are different from one use case to another. So for example, for project view, you would have a Gan view, you have listings, for example, project documents, which will be seen just as related objects. This is the simplest tab that we have, is related objects. We have Kanban views, we have different types of views. There's a specific view for the files, for example. Lifecycle, this is where you will define your node type lifecycle with specific roles and then with a business flow. Actions, it's if the user, when he opens the project list or a specific project, if we want to give him specific actions, we would make the link between these actions he can trigger and methods that you would write with custom code to run specific behaviors. And triggered methods is the same, so it's methods that you would write, but triggered by some system events like creating a new node, updating a node, removing a node, etc. So this is the interface for the data model configuration. Then we have the method editor, so you can see some example for our demo to facilitate the run of the life cycles. We basically, whenever we create a new part, we want to set the creator as the manager in terms of roles in the life cycles. And so we expose in Ganister, we expose a specific API that we are growing internally with more and more methods. And this is an example. So every time you write PLM dot, this is accessing our API. And so one of the functions is set node lifecycle role. So this gives you the opportunity to define a lifecycle role at any moment. So it takes a context. Every method are taking a context. And then you define the type of object, the ID of the object, and in this case we wanted to set the context, the user who is actually running this, and we want to set him as a manager. So it's just an example of the code that we can write in Ganister. Of course, this is JavaScript. Everything is in JavaScript in Ganister. So whether it's client side or server side, we have everything running with one single language. Groups and users, these are groups. There are so permissions. We have specific permissions for all our business items. Groups, you predefine groups, and then you can see who are in these groups. And then you have these users. We'll go deeper again in another videos. List of values, this is simple. You have list of values that you can use in your data model. Reports is a specific thing. It's a way to do reporting using Cypher queries. Don't be afraid by Cypher queries. It's very easy to write. I will show you some specific examples in a specific video. Categories is what you will display in the left panel. Health report, it gives you an insight of how your application works. So here you have, for example, a dozen of reports that are telling you if your data is correct, and you can have some reporting about your server and the error logs. So whenever you've got errors on your server, you can collect them here and understand what's happening. The settings. Setting is for now it's pretty small, but you can still already have a few elements to edit. Basically, in the UI, there are a few things that you can change, and for example, the logos, you don't have to actually go in system files to change the logo. You just have to go here and select another logo, for example. Then translations is where you will select the objects that you want to translate in different languages. If in our demos we have like six languages, if you know you're going to have just two, you can just reduce them to two, and it is fine. And finally, some documentation. So we have an API documentation which describes the whole REST interface, and you can actually test it through this web page. So by signing in, if you sign in here, then you get a credential that you save inside this UI, and it allows you then to test all these REST endpoints. And the tech documentation, which we're enriching all the time with how to manipulate the data model, how do you configure this application. Alright, so we'll go in a deeper presentation in some specific videos, so stay tuned for the coming videos.